or comments? Okay, with that in mind, I'm going to turn it back to Brittany Lamar, I think. Brittany?
Yes, I'm here. I'm experiencing a technical difficulty, so we're
Oh,
just getting the presentation up and running. But we'll turn it over to DOC.
okay, correct. Welcome, people. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, from the Department of Corrections.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Michael Pierce. I'm currently the warden assigned to Manson Youth. Our presentation today is regarding a DOJ settlement. This is the first report that was released on them. They're required to release a report every 6 months. In regards to our progress in terms of what we're doing with the settlement agreement.
Michael, could you say the name DOJ? What does DOJ please stand for? Because some people
DOJ
don't.
stands for the Department of Justice.
Okay, thank you. That came down when? When did the response from the Department of Justice come to us?
This agreement was signed in August of 2024.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Go ahead. I just wanted to make sure people had all the facts.
Okay, so to give some background, when the juveniles came into our care, they came into a setting where it was designed to house adult males. I'm not sure of the name of the facility that was closed, but we were required to absorb those young offenders. Our policies were designed, like I said, to house males, adult males. So when the investigation started, their focus was on mental health, education, and our isolation procedures. And rightfully so, we were found to be in non-compliance, or we needed some help there. So what we're required to do is to increase and enhance our isolation procedures, more so eliminate them as much as we could, increase our education services, and as well as increase our mental health services. So this presentation, we're kind of going to go in order of what the agreement or what the report had released. So we're going to speak to program. We're going to speak to our behavior management, IRC, which you will hear, but that stands for involuntary room confinement. We're going to speak to our enhancements with use of force services, mental health care, education, as well as some new facility initiatives. So to my left, I have Tammy Perot. She's going to speak to our programming. Deputy Ward Linnea Johnson is going to speak to our use of force and our isolation procedures. Principal Matt Rake is going to speak to the education advancements, and Mike Mravacek is going to speak to our mental health improvements. To my left, I have Captain Sandra Harris. She is our compliance liaison. She's a new position that was created. She's pretty much the eyes and ears for the DOJ. A new boss of mine. So when we're not doing something we're supposed to do, she's the one that's going to let us know that we're falling out of compliance. So we're ready to get started.
Michael, could you make sure that everybody just introduces themselves when they start speaking so that we know exactly who they are, please?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Tammy Peralt, Deputy Warden of Programs and Treatment at Manson Youth.
Thank you.
The DOJ found that, the DQE had recommended that we had made several improvements in the areas of programming and activities in comparison to the initial investigation and the visit from the DOJ. Though they found some improvements, they are still recommending additional improvements around increasing programs, activities, programs that are relevant to the youth, activities that are meaningful, programming that is meaningful. So what we've done is we have done a lot of work around surveying the youth, seeing what they are interested in, kind of really doing some research into who it is that we serve and seeing what would best help and support them. In turn, I won't go down the whole list, but we've done a lot of work around increasing our credible messengers. We find a lot of folks, men and women, do like to return and come give a positive message showing them and giving them hope that there is a future for them, and show them that they do have, there is possible for them to have a good path and a good life in the future, that this does not define them. Emerging leaders, the Marshall Project, News Inside, Mr. Lawrence Bartley came in and spoke with our young men. We work to increase life skills around conflict resolution, cognitive behavior therapy, new thoughts, kind of change the way that they're thinking and looking at things. We've increased restorative justice practices around circles. We're offering reentry circles to our youth. Mediations, we do a lot of mediations in our youth cottages. Even something as, I mean, some of the things are more deep, where we have a lot of issues that come in from the community, or perhaps issues that arise within the cottage. So we work to mediate those. We are currently in draft, including restorative justice practices in our unit directive, our policy, to increase our practices. We added an additional MYI Youth Council for specific to the under 18 population, where their voice is heard. We work to survey them, talk to them about, how they're feeling. It also is a way to support them in learning how to advocate for themselves. We've increased our offering of vocational exploration. In the past, we were obligated to only offer it to our 18 and over population due to our memorandum of understanding, though our provider now extended it to the under 18 population, which we greatly appreciate that with Northwest Regional Workforce Investment Board. We've increased our programming around fatherhood for our young dads, earned incentive hour, and increased our sports intramurals. We have, so some of them are upcoming programs. We have a talent show next week. We have staff facilitating home maintenance skills workshops. Some of the guys had talked about really being interested in home maintenance. We're doing photos during visits, so they have kind of supports, family supports, and also softening up their living quarters so that they have more pictures with families, with their family members and friends. Messengers and mentors, we recently created that program. It's a sort of a speaker. We have 3 speakers lined up in the next few weeks. People that we all know, that we've worked with in our time in the agency, that want to come back in and speak to our young men and provide that support, whether it be around reentry or, making new choices. Art expression, we are increasing arts, and also actually they're going to be working on murals throughout our facility to soften up those spaces as well. Mind and strength training, mindfulness, stress management, and we did some surveys around weekend activities, and you can see them listed here, where this is what the youth basically said that they would like to do on the weekends besides sleep in late, which they pretty much all said they like to sleep in. Next slide, please. They noted that we do have our PBIS management program, positive behavior interventions and supports, that we do have our framework, our policy, which was implemented in December 2023, that supports positive behaviors. The monitor did recommend that we increase individual and group incentives, continue to evaluate our program, include the youth voice, which we do. We do this through the council and through surveys. I mean, we survey everything from what snacks they want to, I recently ordered new video games for their PS5. So which video games do you want? Board games, activities, you name it, we include their voice. And we're currently in draft with a new tiered PBIS program. Some of the rewards that we have are classroom of the day, which we collaborate with the school, where they basically determine by points which the best classroom was of the day, and they get added incentive rec, or wing of the day, which is done by the unit staff. So they get added incentive, recreation, the Starbucks, two separate words, snack store. They earn commissary points towards, points towards commissary, which they typically all earn about $20 to $25 weekly, which goes to support their commissary orders and alleviates some of that from the families, some of that, financial burden. Time in the incentive game room, they enjoy the use of PS5s, the beanbag chairs, washers and dryers to learn how to do their own laundry. We have a loaner TV program, and incentivize activities as, various activities that we have at the facility. We continue to have our staff engaged in PBIS training. We participate in national PBIS community of practice meetings, and we facilitate tier 2 and tier 3 support meetings, which with that is so if we identify maybe a couple, it could be just one young man who maybe is struggling, we get together and talk about what he may need. And we include the young man in as well on those thoughts and discussions. Next slide, please. Around employee wellness, the DQE really highlighted the designated qualified expert. They highlighted, their team highlighted the importance of training. Our staff started training around de-escalation, working with youth, our behavior management program, and restorative justice back in March of 2025. We include the staff voice in our meetings to create our policies and to really take a look at how our policies and how all of these new practices are going and include them. And then we also created some staff incentives and recognitions. We have high fives on every Friday. We have staff awards, employees of the quarter. And we also have really strong quality of work life and diversity committees. The DQEs noted the importance of all of these and to just really continue to look for ways to bolster the supports for staff with all of these changes. And I think that overall things are going really well, particularly around the inclusion of the staff voice and informing the staff. I think it's going really well because we have done that thus far. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Linnea Johnson, and I am the Deputy Warden of Operations at Manson Youth Institution. I will be speaking to the concerns mentioned in the monitoring report regarding our behavior management and use of disciplinary isolation. With that said, some of the things that we have done at the facility was implement a new involuntary room confinement program. In August of 2022, the Reflections Accountability Mediation Program, also known as the RAMP program, that was previously used and that has been discontinued to assist with the isolation of our youth following a disciplinary action. Involuntary room confinement, also known as IRC, was implemented in March 1st of this year. And it can be used following an incident where the youth may present some danger to himself, another youth or a staff member, or for investigation purposes. Prior to the placement of a youth on IRC, they are cleared by medical staff or qualified mental health professional to determine if there's any contraindications with the placement. The youth are monitored at 15-minute intervals, and staff are documenting everything while they're on this placement as well. A youth can be placed on this status for up to 72 hours, but I'm happy to report that since the inception of IRC at Manson Youth Institution, no youth has been placed on this status longer than an hour. So that proves that we're not using this to isolate the youth. We're trying to help them to self-regulate, and if they are compliant and they're in a place where they seem to have regulated, they're not placed on that status. And we're happy to report that we use IRC as a last means if we need to. Next slide, please. The next slide that you'll see is a breakdown of incidents involving the juveniles and incidents that require IRC placement. I'm just going to give a brief overview. The orange bar pretty much indicates the incidents involving the juveniles, and the blue bar indicates the number of IRC placements. So again, as you can see, this graph proves that the implementation of IRC has provided a shift of culture, a shift in the culture of the facility for staff and for the youth, because we're not using this again as a punitive measure. We're using it to have the youth to assist them in self-regulating. Next slide. This slide speaks to the use of force policy that we currently have at our facility. All of our incidents involving chemical agent in particular are reviewed by our administrative operations captain and MYI administration, and they are closely monitored to determine if said use was warranted. Following the use of chemical agent, all proper decontamination processes do take place. The youth are escorted to the shower where they're allowed to rinse their facial area, their body. The supervisors are checking to ensure that the water is cold when they're decontaminated. They are also provided with saline wash, facial wash to use for additional decontamination if necessary. And for our use of force, we are definitely following up with any use of force that is utilized. We're having meetings with our supervisory staff to stress the importance of trying to not utilize chemical agent if it's feasible during all of our incidents. Next slide, please. The next slide is pretty much a breakdown and a graph of our incidents involving chemical agent, starting with the month of January to the month of June and July, where you can see an increase in the use of chemical agent. But I have in the next couple of slides, I have a breakdown of what we do to follow up after uses of chemical agent. Specifically in the months of June and July. Summertime, sometimes the youth get a little bit more excited. They're outside more, tempers can flare a little bit. So our use of chemical agent went up in the month of June, in the month of July specifically. We had 2 large-scale incidents in the same day. One took place at 8:30 in the morning. The other took place at 12:40 on that same day. One was involving 6 youth. The other was involving 8 youth. Staff responded to that the way that they were supposed to. Chemical agent needed to be utilized to separate the youth. We're happy to say that no injuries were reported in that incident. And the next slide, Brittany, if you could turn to the next slide, please. The next slide is a spreadsheet that we created, and it's provided actually during our incarceration work group meetings. This slide is a breakdown of how we follow up after every chemical agent use. And I'll just give you just a brief overview. This first one is for the months of April and May, where it indicates that we had 3 incidents involving chemical agent, but our follow-up process includes the date of the incident, the admission date for the youth that were involved, whether they were sentenced or unsentenced, their age at the time of the incident, the reason for the use of chemical agent, the shift in the location that the incident took place on, the verbal de-escalation process and the separation that was utilized by staff. We indicate whether any injuries took place with the youth or the staff. We speak to the youth to find out if they we speak to the youth to find out what led to the altercation or what led to the incident. And then we follow up to indicate whether or not involuntary room confinement was utilized in that incident. Next slide, please. Next slide is the month of June. Pretty much the same thing I just indicated, the breakdown of how we follow up. And in the month of July, the next slide, please, Brittany. The next slide, if you can see the highlighted dates, the highlighted areas are for the altercation that I was speaking to, the large scale incidents that we had on that day, which involved the 8 youth. But again, we followed up with them to find out what took place, how we could possibly mitigate this incident. And we determined that in this incident, there was 1 youth that was involved in quite a few things during the month of June and July. So we communicated with the education staff, and we followed up and actually had a family engagement meeting with this youth and his family to see if they could assist with helping him to regulate his behavior as well, to see if we could provide any services to him. And I'm happy to report that since we have involved the family in the family engagement and with him, that he hasn't been in any incidents since the month of July. So we're actually doing what we need to do to follow up to see what we can do, if we can provide any services or help the youth while they're in the facility. Next slide. I will turn it over to Dr. Moravicek.
All right, good afternoon. Dr. Michael Moravicek. I'm a psychologist. I'm the mental health supervisor at Manson, and I'm responsible for implementing the mental health portions of the agreement. Thank you. Yeah, so for the agreement on the mental health side, there were three main areas of focus. One, to improve our mental health assessment process. Secondly, to improve our treatment planning process. And then to improve our overall mental health treatment with something of a focus on managing treatment refusals. Next slide, please. So the initial investigation by the Department of Justice was about 4 or 5 years ago. So between then and the agreement, there were a lot of changes at Manson. I started about 2.5 years ago, so I wasn't here during the initial time. So it's hard, kind of hard to quantify or judge the actual changes that took place in between that time. But what I can say, we did increase our mental health staff from that time, and we are fully staffed at this point. And I believe we have sufficient staff to not only provide the appropriate care here, but to meet the expectations of the agreement. We put an emphasis on putting a lot of our mental health staff on second shift because of the school day. A lot of the kids are not available for treatment during the school day because they're going to school. And so we put a lot of staff on second shift, including rehabilitation staff, to give them opportunities to access them after school hours. We did some youth specific implementation practices. In the meantime, for example, we identified 2 specific clinicians that work primarily with the youth. They spend a lot of their time actually on the housing units there, so they can build relationships with them, see what's going on there, gives them easy access to care. And we also collaborated with custody around some of the other things that they were doing, like the ramp process that Dep. Warren Johnson had mentioned, and some of the other practices that were in place. So in the couple of years between the investigation and the agreement, there were a lot of changes that got made at Manson, which I feel were very positive. And when I came on board, like I said, a couple of years back, I thought we were in a pretty good place to try to implement the agreement requirements. So some of the specific things that we've done since the agreement about a year ago, a big chunk of that was on identifying, clarifying, quantifying the monitoring processes, the data, and the metrics. My reading of the agreement, and if anybody's taken a look at the initial report here, one of the focus there is on improving the quality of care. So it's not just counting number of sessions. It's, are these sessions going to actually help a young person? Are you providing high quality care, which obviously is a little bit difficult to quantify in numbers. And so we spent a lot of time working with the monitor to try to figure out, okay, how are we going to measure this? How are we going to agree on whether we're meeting the agreement requirements or not? What are the procedures? What should they look like? Does this look good? That type of thing. So we spent a lot of time trying to figure out the processes, which I'm happy to say probably at this point, other than like one area, we've come to some pretty good agreement on. In addition to this, this has allowed for some improved staff training and documentation of that training. The agreement itself requires a lot of specifics. They have like things that they want us to do in a specific way. And this forced me and my team to kind of get together and really talk about this. So a lot of these conversations we'd have about like improving treatment plans or improving treatment that I might have had in supervision, or we might have talked about informally. We implemented some very formal training processes for that. And I started documenting that training very clearly too, so that we can prove to the monitors that we did this. And it also gave my staff a lot of chance to ask questions of me, to go through what they were doing, take a look at it, see if there's ways we could improve. And that training and documentation process has been one of the positive outcomes as well. It's given me a chance to kind of work with my staff around kind of how we want to do what we do, and make sure what we do works. So as far as specifics, the three specific areas, I'll talk about the mental health assessments first. So all youth that come into Manson are evaluated by a qualified mental health professional the same day they arrived. I took the liberty in preparing for this. I looked back over the 51 youth we have currently housed there. And all of them were seen within 24 hours of them showing up. 50 out of the 51 were seen the very day they show up. One of them, it seemed like he got seen the next day, but I think there's a computer error because one system says he came in one day, the other one says he came the other day. So between 98 and 100% compliant with that. And that's my professional experience as well, too. Usually the youth show up like in the early evening when I'm still at work, and they get seen almost immediately by our mental health staff. So that's something we've been doing. I'm not going to say it's part of the agreement because I think we've been doing that consistently ever since, but definitely not an area of concern. We have increased our coordination between different disciplines during the intake process. When someone gets to Manson, they're actually assessed by 3 different groups of people, right? So custody will ask them a series of questions and document that on a piece of paper. Nursing is going to ask them some questions that are, medically related questions. And then they're going to meet with the mental health professional who's going to ask the individual a lot of mental health related questions. Interestingly, all 3 of those assessments involve risk-related questions related to suicide and stuff like that. So unfortunately, the young person gets asked the same question maybe a couple different times, which we kind of knew about. But when we were talking about this process with the monitor, it wasn't always clear that we were communicating that information very well between these types of assessments. If there was like a big problem or a real concern like that would get communicated informally right away. But the actual information that was going in all the documents and reports weren't always getting seen by everybody. So we implemented a process after one of the first monitor visits of coordinating that care. So the custody officer that does the initial interview is going to make a copy of what they write down and give it to my mental health clinician who's going to be able to see it and read it. The nurses, sometimes we see the person before the nurse does, but usually we'll have a conversation with the nurse, take a look at the nursing assessment. And this is actually pretty good because sometimes people answer questions differently, right? They might tell one person, yeah, I'm totally fine. Tell another person like, no, I'm terrible. And then tell a third person, well, I'm totally fine again. And so if you have all that information, you actually can take a look at it and try to figure out, what's what and make a better assessment initially. So that coordination process we've been doing for a while, I think is vastly improved. It's actually cut down a lot of the emails I have to send to people sometimes. So that's been another positive outcome here. We also developed a youth mental health assessment. So the mental health assessment document, it's an electronic health record document that we use at DOC. And it is very adult focused, which makes total sense because, 99% of the population that comes into DOC is an adult, right? So it would make total sense to have our documentation set up to deal with that population. But realistically, it's not really a good fit for young people. So what we've done since the agreement was signed is we worked to try to find a way to make the mental health assessments address areas of the youth's lives that are more important to them. We actually created a new electronic health record document to help us with this. We've sent that to Fusion, who's our record provider, and we're going to be working on, it's not actually in the electronic health record yet, but hopefully it'll be in there soon. While we're waiting on that, I came up with a procedure, like a template for questions to ask about, now, these things like, friends and family. You might not ask a 50-year-old that kind of thing, but you're going to ask a kid a lot about their friends. What do they do in their free time? You're not going to ask them about their military service because they haven't served in the military. We decided not to ask them about, what kind of entitlements they have because they don't know what kind of health insurance they have, right? And so if they give you that information, it's going to be wrong and lead to more confusion. So there's a lot of specific questions the agreement requires us to ask, which is fine. So we've worked that in there. And we've come up with a process where we think kind of assesses, like there was questions about education, which, for someone who's 40 years old, you can ask like some brief questions about their education, and that's probably fine. For kids like this, you want to ask them more questions, especially about their special education needs, kind of what things have been like in school, who they've lived with and stuff like that. A lot of these questions just weren't really captured in our mental health assessment because it was so adult focused. So we try to make that change here. And I'll say, I think we've made a lot of improvements in that area, although I'll add to that. I think we were actually doing a decent job of this prior to, but a lot of times some of this information, even if you talk to the individual about it, you don't always write it down in the assessment if you don't have to, right? So like For example, one of the parts of the agreement wants us to clearly document whether someone is referred for psychiatric medications or not, right? So if we do see somebody and we feel like they need psychiatric medications or they've been taking them or something like that, that'll almost 100% of the time get clearly documented in a mental health assessment. But if this person's never taken medication and doesn't really need it, would you always write down like explicitly does not need, right? And maybe you won't do that all the time because you always, it's easy to document the positives because you want to communicate that to somebody, but you're not always going to document all the negatives because sometimes that's, kind of a waste of time when you're trying to get something done. But so I think we were doing a lot of these things. Maybe we just weren't getting documented clearly. And we're trying to do a good job, a better job of doing that now to make sure that we can prove to the monitors that we're doing all these things. Let's see here. So improved document. Okay, so I talked about the certain details there. We had, in the meantime, between the investigation and the agreement, started a process of doing like a trauma screening. And what was in use when I got there was a questionnaire, like an ACE questionnaire, which some people might be familiar with, this Adverse Childhood Experiences questionnaire, which is okay. But that it's really not a good clinical tool. That questionnaire is designed, it was designed by an insurance company, I believe, just to collect some information. And it was never like intended to be used for a screening tool. And so therefore it doesn't ask a lot about some specific types of trauma experiences kids might have had. And it certainly doesn't ask about symptoms and how that impacts the person now, right? So it's nice to know if something happened to somebody in the past. It's even better to know how that experience currently impacts them today, and if it's still bothering them, and if so, in what way, right? So we actually replaced that ACE screener with something called the STRESS, the Structured Trauma-Related Experiences and Symptoms Screener. It was something that was developed actually here in Connecticut by UConn Health Center, which is a much better screening tool in my mind. I like it a lot better than the ACE questionnaire. And it does give us an opportunity not only to assess like a full range of traumatic experiences a child might have experienced, but also their current symptomology, and helps us in our diagnostic decision-making. So I was able to train all my staff in the utilization of that. Happily, it's a free tool. And happily the author, is in West Hartford, who answers emails really easily. So it's easy to get a hold of. So that process has improved our mental health assessments as well. And those are really like the major changes we've seen since then, since the implementation of the agreement. With regards to treatment planning, which should be on the next slide there, right? So our policies in DOC were generally consistent with the agreement. The agreement requires us to have treatment plans, which I'm fully supportive of as a professional. I think you need a treatment plan to engage in appropriate treatment. Wants us to update them every 120 days, which is actually our current DOC policy. So we are in compliance with that. I took a look, we started keeping track of this for the agreement. And so I took a look back and over the past 6 months, we are at like 115 out of 117 were updated within the 120 days, 98% compliance rate. And I think the 1 month you had to go all the way back to March where we missed a couple. And I really believe the electronic health record was down for a couple of days during that period of time. And that's the rationale why we didn't get those updated. So again, I feel like we're doing a very good job of that, and we're keeping track of that for the monitor as well. The treatment plans, they did require, the agreement does require some additional information to be included in there. So that's been, again, a focus of our training there to make these, not just do more of these, but to do higher quality treatment plans. And that's something we're continuing to work on within the mental health team here. And I have an auditing process in place, but we made some progress as far as metrics there. We've come up with that template and procedure for the treatment plans. I completed training on the new treatment planning process as required by the agreement back at the end of April, early May for all my staff. We just revisited a couple of days ago, actually, during a different training process. And I've developed an auditing process, which I've been in the process of doing and then forwarding to the monitor for the past couple months here. The last area is mental health treatment overall. And again, this is probably one of the trickier ones to try to quantify, like how do you know you're doing good treatment, right? It's somewhat hard to measure. I mean, you can use like various questionnaires or symptom screeners where people kind of, you fill out the Beck depression inventory every session to see if your depression's going up and down and stuff like that. That is a way to quantify these kinds of things. Kids don't like that stuff typically, like filling out things like that. So usually our assessment of, treatment progress and things like that are much more qualitative. So this is one of the areas I'm continuing to work on with the monitor here. We have implemented a multidisciplinary team meeting that occurs monthly. This started this year in February. I run it the first Wednesday of every month. I invite everybody, custody, education, the reentry people, addiction services. The administration comes. We all get together and we can talk about any of the youth that anybody wants to talk about. If someone's having trouble in school, if someone's missing classes, which hasn't really happened recently, if someone's having other particular problems, that's a forum for everybody to kind of give some feedback, talk about, discuss, and try to follow up on. We can call those as needed. We haven't had to do that so far, but that's like a monthly venue for everybody to talk about that, which then does inform our treatment plans. It helps our clinicians know what's going on. It gives our clinicians a chance to give feedback to other people about things that may be helpful for the individual. And those meetings, I think I've really appreciated this year. Outside of the agreement, DOC in general started doing these wellness clinics. So twice a year, DOC Health Services put in a process by which everybody in DOC is checked out by medical twice a year as far as risk issues and as far as kind of like their overall medical well-being. And so that process does include the young people as well. And so they're included in this process too. So they additionally get checked on by a nurse a couple of times a year, in addition to all the other, opportunities they have to write requests if they're sick or they feel ill and things like that. The last of the major changes here is regarding our group programming, and this is a change that's still in process. If any of you have been at these meetings in the past, I've talked about kind of the implementation of the mental health treatment for youth in previous meetings. And what we had really when I showed up at MI was a model where the clinicians would not only be on the units to talk with the young people, but they'd run groups wing by housing wing, and everybody would be invited to that. So whether you were in active mental health treatment or not, you could come to the group. They'd run it. We saw it as a way to engage people, to open access to care. If people were reluctant to participate in care, it kind of made it like more normative and things like that. But as we started talking with the monitor of the agreement, and she came and saw some of the groups, the recommendation was like, well, that's nice. There are some positives to being able to engage everybody, but there's some drawbacks to that too. And some of the drawbacks are it's hard to implement focused treatment in that way because you're going to have a group full of people, some of whom may have some specific mental health needs, some who don't, right? And so you got a group of, 15, 16-year-olds, and some of them are there to really, because they want to get something out of it. Some are there just because they're bored. Some are there and distracted. And it doesn't really lead to a group where you can get a lot of clinical work done. So the recommendation was the transition away from this model where we were kind of providing, treatment out to everybody, and to focus our group treatment kind of by diagnosis and by skill set, so that we can really engage the people that need it in the way that they need it. And we're not trying to paint too broad of a brush here. So we're in the process of doing that. If we look at groups in general, we used to run a lot of groups. We're going to see those numbers trend down though, because we're going to get a little bit more targeted in our treatment. You go back to May, there were probably 153 individual group encounters. That's people that attended a group, and in August it was about 82. So it speaks to kind of our tailoring of our treatment down here based on the recommendations to monitor, which is something I totally agree with too. I think I saw some of the positives of trying to engage everybody, but I also saw those drawbacks too. And I'm actually a pretty big advocate for taking a look at, let's find the right group for the right person at the right time. And really tailoring our treatment and making sure that it matches up with our treatment plans in that way. There's about 51 youth that are, or not about, there's exactly 51 youth that are at Manson right now. 26 of them are in active mental health treatment, so that's about half. Typically, if you look DOC wide, about a third of DOC inmates are in active mental health treatment, so our number is much higher than that. And of those 26, about 13 of them are on psychiatric medications. So that's, half of the people in active mental health care and a quarter of the total youth population at Manson. So we provide, pretty broad spectrum of services that people can access whenever they need. And we, provide the care, I think, in a way that really captures a lot of the needs of these young people. So that's where we are now. We are going to move on to education here. And like I said, a little bit more progress to come, but I personally feel very good about the progress we've made over the past year with the agreement.
All right, good afternoon. I'm Principal Matt Rink, and I'm currently working at the MYI school. So when the Department of Justice came and, you know, they did their audits and visits and such, they came out with basically 6 categories of things they wanted to change within the school environment. And as you could see, they're listed up there. The first one, they wanted us to really up our PD, especially our PD as it applies to special education. And each slide is going to go into greater depth on each one of these categories here. Secondly, they wanted expanded monitoring and implementation of IEP accommodations. For those who aren't in education, accommodations are essentially instructional tools that allow students who are designated special education to succeed in the classroom. Third, they wanted us to improve our transition planning. And by transition, it could actually mean a variety of transitions. For example, it could mean a transition into post-secondary education. It could mean a transition into the world outside of incarceration. So we'll go into that in a more detailed manner momentarily. Tiered intervention system. In education, we have a million acronyms and abbreviations for things. Oftentimes, this is called RTI or SRBI. Basically, it's a way of improving the base level skills of students who really need it. Early stage student data collection. So when a student is originally coming into the facility and signs up for school, or if they're under 18, they're automatically in school, they asked us to do more of finding out more about them, both academically, behaviorally, and also looking at their past records and seeing so that it can really inform us how to best educate this student effectively. And quality assurance framework, and that's going to be our last slide, and that's essentially how do we ensure we're doing what we say we're doing. So next slide, please. Okay, really the undergirdings of any positive change is going to come in staff professional development or training. So speaking towards that, we have given over 125 hours since September of 24. Of course, that's not all with one particular employee. Over the course of many employees and over the course of just about a year now. Some of these topics, differentiated instruction, in other words, this is a tool where teachers are able to give leveled assignments to meet students where they're at so that a student doesn't feel excluded because maybe his reading level isn't quite to the student next to him. On the other side of that, it could mean that you're giving a student who's gifted more challenging work so that they can get more out of the lesson. So differentiated instruction is the way a teacher reaches every student in their classroom. Transition planning, which we will go into in the next slide. Trauma-informed restorative justice. We've really embraced restorative justice. It's certainly a DOJ initiative, but it's really become our initiative. And by that, we've had trainings in restorative circles. We utilize restorative justice whenever a student and a teacher have a serious behavioral incident. We even use it between staff. If there's ever a disagreement or somebody interpreted or they have a misunderstanding, we'll get them together and utilize these same tools. And we find it's quite effective. I've yet to see one that's has not been effective. Tier 1 behavioral interventions. Tier 1 is education speak for everybody. So what that means is ways to help everybody in the classroom without necessarily resorting to a structured special education prescription. So it could be something as basic as repeating directions for students who need it, or making sure that a student is understanding everything and has every tool they need. Maybe it's a colored marker to help them highlight aspects of a paper or what have you. Lesson planning with accommodations. A huge part of what we do now is that our teachers need to actually look at the IEP for each one of their special education students, and they have to show us or tell us how they're going to teach towards those accommodations. So this keeps the accommodations in the front of the educator's mind, and hopefully it's going to allow for a more seamless utilization of those accommodations, and I find it has. SRBI instructional strategies, that's really going to be one of our next slides. And IEP writing for DOJ compliance, essentially taking a hard look at what is best for the student and giving them a custom IEP that will help them succeed in their personal way, in however they define success. So not all students have the same needs, so not all students will have the same IEP. Next slide, please. All right, now I'm about to get excited. So the reason is transition planning is something I feel strongly about the department does as a whole. So I'll try to hold my excitement when I discuss this first one. MAP, making action plans. You know, it's amazing how well people learn when something is concrete and visual. And making MAP sessions is a way of doing that. So essentially, each one of our special ed students will eventually have one of these sessions, but they're going to take people that are very important to them, parents, guardians, maybe people on the compound, staff members that are working with them closely, teachers, special ed teachers, so on, so forth. They get to tell us who their team is going to be, essentially. And if it's appropriate, we'll include them. And they're going to sit down and they're going to discuss this student's unique path to success. Everyone has a different goal, and that's okay. But we're going to visually map out that path towards success. So on this document, and it's a fairly large piece of paper, imagine a poster board, you can have a section where you write down all your supports, all the people who can help you and how they can help you. This may not even be people. It may be agencies that are in the communities that are ready to help guys as they discharge from incarceration. So we're teaching them about what their resources are and how, and making sure that they're intentional about using these resources. Next, it's going to show all the steps along the way they need to take in order to achieve success. Maybe that's vocational training. Maybe that's going and getting a college diploma or degree or what have you. It's different for everybody. And we find that when the students are done doing this exercise, they can actually visualize and finally have a concrete path towards where they're going. And I think that's great for every human being, not just those who are under 18 at MYI. Secondly, Project Genesis. Each one of our special education teachers has basically a toolkit. And it's a toolkit that's created with 5 modules, has resources and exercises for each one of these modules. And really, it's a way that a student will get to know themselves, get to know what they're interested in, get to explore careers, and just like in the MAP exercise, identify their supports. These guys need help. We all do. And we all have stood on the shoulders of others to get where we are. It's important that we identify those who they can stand on their shoulders. Next slide, please. Okay, less exciting, but just as important is early stage student data collection. So a student comes to MYI. First thing we're going to do is request their records, find out if they want school, interview them, see what their goals are, if they have them at that age, which many do. And then we're going to place them in school. But once they're placed in school, it's important that we observe and see how they're doing in their classes in those first few weeks to a month. So we have formalized reports and observation tools that are done to see if there's any concerns that really stand out that we need to deal with on a formal level. So, and that includes speaking to teachers and that sort of thing, getting baseline reading data on them. You know, what's their reading level? Getting baseline math data on them. Now, what is it to have a tiered intervention system? Beyond the acronyms, what it really means is this. If a student comes in and tests well below grade level in reading or math, we're going to go get them individual, one-on-one is individual, going to get that sort of remediation that they can do outside of their classroom to supplement and build up their foundational skills so that they can be successful in school. And honestly, it's been quite successful. And though the way a student would get to those supports would be through recommendation or through assessment testing. If a child is already in special ed, we don't need to do these intervention systems because special education is the intervention and the IEP is a structured form of intervention. Next slide, please. So one of the number one things that the DOJ discusses with us is the concept of memorialization. So what does that mean? It's a way to take these policies, these procedures, which we've changed significantly, and to put them in a form that won't be forgotten. We've all seen initiatives in every walk of life that start with the ball of fire and then fade out. We don't want that to occur, nor will it occur. And the way we do that is through memorializing our policies and procedures. So we work together, not just MYI people out, central office people and such, and developed an MYI policy and procedure handbook. One that's going to let, when I retire and another principal steps in, how are they going to know what they need to do? And that policy and procedure manual will be that way. Another aspect, let's say you come in and you're a new assistant principal or you're a new educator and you want to know what you have to do specifically at MYI that's unique to MYI, that's most important for MYI. That handbook is going to let you do that. And it's important to know, as most documents nowadays, it's a living document. If we see something we can improve, we will make that change in the handbook. And that's so I'm hoping that we make a whole lot of improvements and continually improve this handbook. So it's a cycle of continuous improvement. It is, at this exact moment in time, it's being reviewed by the Department of Justice. So it is not officially in use until they give us the okay, which we're expecting. I'm expecting it around October 8th. Okay, next policy or next slide, please. Okay, and last slide, maybe the most important slide. What is it that we're doing to ensure the things we're saying actually are happening? Not just things on paper, but things in practice. And that quality assurance falls on administration more than anything, as it should. But the first one is actually falls on the teacher, and that is special ed teachers are documenting every service they provide and the duration of that service so that an administrator can then randomly audit these records and make sure that we're providing the services we say we are. So that is done weekly, and we audit it in a random fashion weekly. I'm looking at all the administrators, there's 3 of us, are looking through all the lesson plans every week to determine that the accommodations are embedded in their lesson plans. And then at least once a quarter, we shoot for twice a quarter, we're going to do these essentially classroom visits, classroom observations. We go class to class and we look to see special education accommodations in action. And we've done a few of these so far, and then we write up a little summary. And if we see something that needs to be discussed with the teachers, we will do so. And that, again, is a way for us to ensure we're doing what we say we're doing. And then lastly, we keep data on a whole lot of things now, and we update those data, all our different repositories of data. We update them weekly. We don't ever want to let it get away from us and then get away from the practice of keeping data. We're in the groove. It's part of our policies and procedure handbook. So by memorializing it and essentially auditing constantly, we're assuring success through the future. And that's it for education. Thank you.
So next slides, we're going to talk about a few new facility initiatives that we're taking place. You can go to the next slide. So when the DQEs visited the facility for the their first visit, they had some concerns with the actual physical plant. They understood that there wasn't so much that we can do at the facility. We had to explain that the facility was built in the late 70s. It was built with the intention of housing adult males, but we're all aware that we do house juveniles there as well. So we had a $5 million line item that was added to the agency budget so that we'll be able to make some renovations to one of the cottages. Right now, we're planning to purchase some softer furniture to make things look more like a college dormitory setting. That includes a new desk with a stool, potentially a nightstand, new mattresses, things of that nature. Do what we can to try to make it look more like home. The last meeting we had on that was August 14th. We're meeting on that regularly as well. Next slide. So this is my favorite of them all. Radio frequency identification system. You might hear us say RFID, but that's what we're referring to. This system will allow us to track where the offenders are when they're in their cells, when they leave their cells, when they leave the unit, when they report to school, when they leave. We are required to provide data. We can tell you guys till we're blue in the face what we do, but until we can actually show it and quantify it, I guess it means minimal, but this would allow us to do so. So when they go to a program, we'd be able to document what program that is. If the young man has to leave early, if he shows up late, we'll be able to let you all know and provide information as to why he was late. The staff member he was with. This would pretty much be able to allow us to quantify the things that we always cannot quantify. If we're teaching a young man how to tie a tie, that's not something that you can quantify. If a young man needs a pep talk, we can't quantify that. So these are some of the systems that we can use to be able to quantify those things. Visits. We're asked to provide data surrounding visits as well. Again, wherever he goes, whichever staff member he's with, this will be able to give us the ability to provide that stuff. Next slide. Body scanners. Manson Youth and York CI are going to be the two facilities that are going to be piloting body scanners. We had 2 installed today. These will be used to significantly decrease and often eliminate the use of strip searches. Just looking forward to see how things go. Again, it's a pilot program. At some point, this will be spread out to all the facilities, but Manson Youth and York will be the start. Yep, that's the last slide. So we're open and available for any questions that you all may have.
Thank you. I want to thank everybody from Department of Corrections who made the presentation today. It's very informative, and I'm hoping that it has jarred a lot of questions. So I'm going to open it up to questions first before I ask any. Are there any questions? Yep.
I have some questions, Dr. Lisa Simone.
Thank you. And can I ask everybody to sort of go right into their question? I know you don't know, we have about 15 or 20 more minutes, so we want to make sure we get as many questions as possible. Go ahead.
Okay, so the question that I had was, I know that there was the chemical agent incident that occurred in July, and it seemed like both within the same day, but it happened in the classrooms. The question that I have, was there any opportunity for restorative mediation? Because clearly the kids are going back into those classrooms. And if yes, what does that process look like and what was the result of that?
So in that particular incident, yes, we have a unit manager that's assigned to every housing unit, and he actually called all of the individuals that were involved in that incident, sat them down, and had an open-ended conversation with each one of them collectively as a group to determine, what could have been done differently, why they engaged in the way that they did. And then, as I mentioned before, we had a family engagement meeting with one of the youth that was involved in both of those incidents. And since that, he has not been involved in any other altercations. So in that particular incident, as we do with our others, we do attempt to sit down with the youth, have conversations with them, make housing unit moves if we need to just try to restore the safety for them, essentially. So in that incident, yes, we did.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Undersecretary and then Representative Nolan.
Thanks so much. I actually have a handful of questions, so maybe I'll just enter them into our record and we'll go from there. Did the Department of Justice require us to produce any baselines on some key indicators so that we could measure our progress at Manson, for specifically things like use of force, out of cell time, isolation, educational outcomes, not throughputs or training, but outcomes? Do we have any mandatory baselines that would be prior to the agreement or even conceivably prior to the 19 FTEs that were funded at the initiation of the investigation, but prior to the agreement? Just looking for some measurable baselines so we can gauge our progress. And if the DOJ didn't require it, maybe we should generate them ourselves. That's my first set of questions. Principal, on the educational outcomes, I understand that mental health outcomes are difficult to measure. But it would be good next time to hear what do we have out there when we're going to therapy or we're going to other kinds of things out in the field. How do we measure investments in mental health, and are outcomes in education similarly difficult to measure? That is to say, is it equally difficult to measure improvements in educational outcomes? I think those are my two sort of categories. Question. Thank you, Co-Chair.
Go ahead. Brittany, who else?
Representative Nolan.
Representative Nolan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for what you presented to us. I'm interested in knowing about the body scans, the pilot program. You said that was initiated starting today. Could you just elaborate a little bit on that?
So they were installed today. We're looking to have them
Oh.
online on October 1st.
Okay, thank you. And going back to your loaner TV program, your PS5 program that you have with those, how often or what do they have to do to use those things? How often are those things available for them?
At present time, the loaner TV programs are available to them every day. We are considering including them in the PBIS program and making them an incentive. We will include the youth voice in this decision, but we are considering them. But at present time, everyone has a TV that is loaned to them every day in their living quarters to use. And with PS5s, we have 4 PS5s in each cottage, and their use of the incentive room is incentivized, and they earn time in the room. There is time every day that is allotted and determined, according to their behavior. And we also will be revisiting how that is awarded through the tiered system as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And 2 more questions, if I may, if nobody else has questions, Madam Chair.
Go right ahead.
In regards to the best classroom of the day, can you just elaborate on how that works? Is it the youth that has that makes that happen, or is it the whole classroom that makes that happen?
So that's one of our incentive programs, essentially we try to form or harness the competitive energy of class versus class in a way such as who's the best, which is, and by best, I mean best behaved, hardworking in class. So it benefits all of us. Essentially what it is it's it's linked to our PBIS program, where each teacher rates each class that they see for the day, and they see 3 classes a day. And then they input their PBIS score, 1 through 4, for each of their students. And the Excel program generates which class had the highest average for that particular day. And if that class, won, quote unquote, for the day, then they're allowed to go to what we call 3:30 rec, which means they get to go play basketball in the gym at 3:30, and it's highly coveted by the students. That's for sure.
Okay. And f- a question about when we visited uh, the facility, and we were taken on a tour, and there was a specific area where they got to do music, editing, video. We listened to one of the young men who created a song. Um, how's that program going? I know we tried to talk about getting funding for it, but wasn't able to at the time. Hopefully we could do that in not so distant future. But how is that program? Is that still active just as much or more than it was prior?
Yeah, so Dr. Moravchik, yeah, that program is still functioning quite well. We have 3 rehab therapists that fall under kind of my department. One of them's a music therapist that does run a number of music groups for the youth. And yeah, it's fully functioning, up and running. One of the highlights of the rehab programming that we have at MYI. The kids love it, staff love it. That's a really great program.
I'd
Yeah.
like to add that the facility did purchase some more equipment so that we can accommodate more students in the class.
Oh, okay. Well, that's great. And can you just send me the date and time of like your talent show things that you guys might do? I'd really like to come and observe or partake in uh the enjoyment that they might have doing that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for your questions. And I think a lot of us would like to know when there are different activities at Manson. So it would be really great if you share with us so that if we can come and participate or observe, it would be very helpful for all of us to sort of see some of the changes that you have talked about in this presentation. Are there any other questions? Are there
Yes,
any?
we do have more questions. We
Oh.
have 4 people lined up. So I'm going to go with
Whoa.
Gordon, Martha, Thea, and then we have one other individual as well. One of the-
I'll go in at the end. Okay.
Okay. Okay, but we're limited in time, so I'm just
Yep.
gonna.
I'll
Okay.
be quick. So Derek Gordon, Consultation Center at Yale. So my question is more kind of from the behavioral health perspective. You talked about not being able to quantify change. I wonder if you could actually do like a pre-post assessment using the behavioral health screeners that you guys have to kind of look at symptoms, decrease in symptoms reported by the students, and or the increase in their skills or the capacity to manage the behavioral health challenges that are going on. So being able to kind of use those things as a way of kind of showing the effectiveness of the intervention. And then for one of my fellow colleagues here, the question that we have was the percentage of students who are currently on IEPs within the system.
Someone?
I'll answer the IEP question.
Mhm.
Out of our current under 18-year-old population,
Mhm.
61% have an IEP.
And I guess a follow-up to that, to kind of maybe piggyback on that, is to kind of clarify whether or not there is some sort of formal assessment that happens to actually, for the other 39%, if my math is right, who might not come in with an IEP diagnosis, but actually meet the criteria, and kind of help and think about how you can leverage that to kind of get them what they need while they're in the system.
Yeah, so if they don't come in with an IEP, that's part of our first 30 days that the DOJ prescribed. It's a good policy. And essentially, teachers, they're going to be tested for reading level. They're going to be tested for mathematical prowess. And not only that, teachers themselves are going to see how they perform in the classroom. But based on that early entrance original academic data and also teacher observations, they'll be, based on one of those or both of those, they will be referred into our tiered intervention system, or RTI, which means they're going to try to improve their skills. If they find that they're not making the progress necessary to get up to the place they should be, then they will be referred for special education. So coming in without an IEP doesn't mean you leave without an IEP. it's certainly a possibility that we could designate you.
And with regards to the using like the symptom measures, yeah, that's one possible outcome that we're looking into. This kind of speaks to the baseline question. I think part of the process is that we're trying to develop kind of like, hey, what are we doing? How are we measuring it right now? And then as we start implementing the different measurements, like for the treatment plans and so forth, like I'm going to count that kind of as our baseline data and then see how we move from there. I think it's a little bit tricky with the kids because a lot of them come in with a really complex presentation. And so it's not like someone's just walking into like an anxiety disorders clinic where you're going to know that, okay, we're going to give them this, GAD screen and that's because that's what they're showing up. Some of these kids are showing up, they don't want to be in mental health treatment, right? They've been kind of compelled to counseling by a lot of different people before they've gotten to us. And so there's a key element of what we do is like the engagement process with that to try to, get them to, actively participate in treatment. So yeah, I think we're working on a couple different ways of doing that with the monitor, and it is going to be a work in progress. But I do agree that I think that's going to be actually a good process for us as a treatment team to figure out like how to measure this and what it's going to look like, so on and so forth. So I understand.
And I would even kind of push a little bit further and say, even their connection to the supports and services that you guys are offering might be another metric you can actually think about. So even if somebody were to come in resistance, which young people will say no, and then they actually show up, that could be seen as a level of engagement in the supports that you're providing and speak to kind of whether or not, and I think about it from a dosage perspective, whether or not an increased dosage result in better outcomes with long term for the young people around their behavioral profile, if I can say it that way.
Right. Yeah. And I definitely want to move above and beyond like the idea like, well, this kid's not getting in fights anymore, so therefore he's better, right? Like that's not a good outcome measure. And I agree. I think those types of things, you'll see kids at MYI that are not theoretically actively engaged in mental health treatment that talk to the social worker every week or a couple times a week. When I first implemented the multidisciplinary team meeting, I think my initial thought was like, we're going to talk about all these kids that are having difficulties. And one of the surprises for me in some of those early meetings were how much information the staff members are saying, like how good people were doing. Like, oh, this kid's doing this and he's doing that. I never expected he would do this. And it ended up being a much more positive meeting than I originally intended. So yeah, good idea. I think that might be a way to do that as well. And I'm looking forward to, trying to figure that out for us.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Martha and then Thea.
Martha Stone, Center for Children's Advocacy. In looking at the actual monitor's report, I think it was pages 19 and 20, he listed a lot of different additional recommendations. And I think you've covered a couple of them, the design, but there was one recommendation on that list that was to increase substantially out of cell time. And I didn't see any of the slides that you presented talking about that. I'm wondering if you could talk about that particular issue, which I think is really an important issue for the kids.
So in terms of the out of cell time, the state's required to provide at a minimum of 5 hours of out of cell time per day. The offenders or the youth are out of their cells at least 5 hours out of the day. They're actually out of their cells more. Their concern was more meaningful time outside of their cells. And again, they are partaking in programs, they are partaking in incentivized activities, but they felt as though it wasn't as meaningful as it could be.
Thea, and then after Thea, we've got two community expertise members who have questions, Devon and Adonis.
Great, thank you. Thea Montanez, advisor to the governor's office. Two quick things. With regard to the data you're collecting, thank you, by the way, Warden Pearson team, for your presentation. With regard to the use of chemical agent and the data that you're collecting, do you also have a sense for how many of these young people have been involved in multiple incidences where they're exposed to chemical agents?
Yes, that data is provided to the incarceration work group.
Got it. Okay. I'll look for it then. Thank you. And then my second comment is related to York. Now, I know they don't have nearly the same number of young people, that 15 to 17-year-old population as Manson does, but I believe, I'm very curious about even if it was one young woman that's at York, and I don't know when's the last time York has been asked maybe to present to this group, just to give us a sense for how they're responding to the educational needs and the special health needs of those young women, but I think I certainly would benefit from meeting their team and hearing and getting a better understanding of how they're caring for those young women in their custody. But I believe the settlement was just specific to Manson, correct? Yes. Okay. All right. That's just the second point and request I have of the JJPOC. Thank you.
Thank you. And
Okay, thank you. So first I want to say, like, amazing work. Like, I don't know, like, I was there 25 years ago and out of control, violent. So first I just want to say you guys are doing amazing work. My question is to go back to the grant that you guys were awarded and the redevelopment of one of the cottages, because one of the main things I know a lot of us miss is that we are in prison before we get to prison. So our communities are so, like, dangerous, violent, parents struggling, drug addiction. So before we even get to NYI or before we even get to juvenile detention, we have already been in prison. So when we get there, my screams when I was 11 used to really be help me or I'm scared, and we don't know how to communicate that. So what I want to know is that new version that you guys are testing. I know it's going to be amazing, but I want to know, what is the vision to keep it to go until we transition to our kids not going to jail? These should be healing centers, mentor centers, where there's no tension between the COs and the inmates. It's more like mentors and staff. So I want to know if you can elaborate just real quick. I know we ain't got enough time, but just on that vision.
So your environment does play a huge role in your development. But sometimes good things come out of bad places, right? So we can only do the best with what we have. The vision is to make things softer. We visited CSSD, multiple facilities. We visited facilities in other jurisdictions like Hampton County. I actually had the privilege of visiting facilities in Norway. Everything is always much softer. It does not look like a prison. It does not have a prison vibe. Staff are a lot more polite. Not that our staff are extremely polite that deal with the juveniles, but the physical plant does play a huge role. And again, I have to reiterate, good things do come out of Manson Youth. You did some time Manson Youth 25 years ago, and look where you're sitting right now. But again, we'll always continue to do the best that we can with what we have.
Donis?
Hello. Yeah, my name is Adonis. And I guess I just have, my question is towards the principal. Are juveniles able to get vocational training currently? And I have two questions. And how many vocational learning programs are currently active at MY today?
So currently we have 5 vocational programs active, and our under 18 population is able to access vocational programming. However, it's done differently than those who are over 18 years old. So our under 18 years old students who are in our high school program, we do have a couple that are in a different program because it worked well for them. But so we have 7 classes that they rotate through. One of them is a vocational class. At this moment, it's graphic arts, which is more computer based. It's not old school graphic arts with printers. It's about learning the computer skills to manipulate digital images. They absolutely love it. And once we get, now we have a revolving population, so it's very difficult to keep a cohort, on the same track. However, after roughly 9 months in a particular vocation, we're going to switch the vocation. So prior to this, it was auto technology and auto body. follow it probably in about 2 more months. We're going to move to culinary arts for our under 18 youth. If they were to graduate, they have their pick of any of our vocational programs. But we do want to prioritize them becoming a graduate also.
Thank you. Rep Walker, you have the floor.
Thank you, and thank you, Department of Corrections, for the presentation that you presented to us today. We've been waiting for it so that we can actually start to go through and join forces with the organizations that we have around here that are also to help you in making some of the transitions. A lot of things were said that give us belief and strength that knowing that we are making changes, and it's important, as many as Adonis and some of the others said, it's important that we try and continue with this progress. I will say a couple of things stuck out, and I heard it in the questions, and one of them was about the mental health process or assessment. And I think the comment that was made, which made me a little concerned, was we all know how difficult it is to assess progress with the mental health assessment. I think there are some out there. I think some that are there. And so maybe we need to help you guys connect with some of the other programs and things that are out there that can help you in looking at your assessment. The other thing that I was listening to was about the chemical agents, and I wanted to ask, what type of de-escalation training did your COs go through, and how long in order to be there?
De-escalation training is completed by every staff member at NYI. It's on an annual basis.
Okay, so it's an annual. So so that means that it's rotating. So looking at the numbers of incidents and things like that, and then the reactions and how you work with it, do you think the de-escalation training is working, or there's some things that need to be monitored or explained further for your staff that are handling that?
They're definitely worth monitoring.
Mhm.
We are monitoring every incident, whether a chemical agent is involved or not. Quality assurance that we're running behind it's pretty extensive. Lieutenants are reviewing the incident. My shift commanders are reviewing the incidents. My admin captain reviews the incident very thoroughly. Onto my deputy wardens and myself. My boss reviews each incident as well as the commissioner's office. So we are reviewing them. Staff are met with following each usage, to determine if they feel as though there could have been something done differently. So it's something that we are monitoring. We all would like to see 0 each month. But unfortunately, with the fights that we have, and sometimes it can take one hit or one kick that could change families' lives. So it's something that we don't want to use, but sometimes it just happens.
So I appreciate your candor in this, because I think maybe that is something that, again, with the groups that we work with between JJPOC and some of the others, it would be, I think, worthwhile for us to have those discussions with some of the professionals that we've been engaged with, and some of the people that you have. My other question was on the school. I wanted to know where has MAP been used, and Project Genesis, and how long have you used either one of them, just to get an idea?
So I'll start, and actually, you know what? I'll hand it over to the special education director, because she is a little more close to it than myself.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Rita Halkias, Director of Special Education for the Department of Correction. So I can start by talking about MAP sessions. All the teachers and pupil service specialists at NY did receive training this school year. So they were fully trained September of this school year, and we
expanded upon that, and there's at least 2 teachers at every single facility statewide that are currently using maps to help facilitate smoother transitions. So that is something new to our district. I'm just as excited as Mr. Rank is about it. It's a wonderful opportunity to get all stakeholders together and really talk about student outcomes for our student population. So it's been very successful.
I'm sorry, can I just, where have you observed it? I want to know where it is being, where it is being utilized, that you observed it to be so supportive of it.
Yep. So I, after we did the training, I went to MYI. They facilitated their first map session in the visiting room, actually. So we had parents, guardians, BRS was involved. We had reentry. We had the student people service specialist. It was probably around 15 participants. So I observed it specifically at MY, and I also observed one at Garner CI for a student there. So
okay, so it's not something that you saw out in the field. This is something that is strictly for DOC, correct?
no, this is commonly used throughout all the districts in Connecticut. I actually, the first time I ever saw it was for the Connecticut Technical High School system, which is where I worked previous.
Okay. Okay, and Project Genesis?
Project Genesis is a transition toolkit, like Mr. Rank said. It's 5 modules. It was created with a group of Department of Correction USD1 staff members, including myself, a transition coordinator, and people service specialists. That was rolled out at York specifically last year with the support of a grant. It was rolled out the beginning of this school year at Manson Youth Institution and the rest of the facilities within our state.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for your, Warden Pierce, I think that you guys are trying hard to put this together and provide our kids with a new direction. And we want to make sure that we help you in every way possible. So I'm going to ask that we sort of break this down off camera, not off camera, but in meetings, and sort of talk with the specialists that are responsible for crafting this, so that we can give them the credit, and then maybe also provide them with continued support or other opportunities to talk to other people with other methods of measuring success. Because if we can't measure, then we can't declare success. It would be just anecdotal. So we need to figure out, how are we going to measure, and we also should do it in a timely fashion. If it's going to work, we should see something happen within a 6 to 9 month period. Otherwise, we're still doing the same things in the process, which will never allow us to make change. So again, I thank you for what you guys presented today, and I look forward to continued conversation on some of the things that the questions we're focusing on. So thank you again. Thank you, Erica. Thank you, Brittany, for all your work. I believe that was the last presentation. Am I correct?
That is correct. Our next scheduled meeting is October 16th, and Brittany will be sending out all the materials for that.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you very much for everybody, and have a great weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.